Hi folks, and as I am recording this, it is just after the Fox Valley Marathon, Half Marathon, Final Fall 220 of 2017, which was, I believe, far and away the hottest weather they have ever had for this race. This year we seem to have the August weather in September. We had the September weather in August. I was very fortunate because I've had many races where the weather's been warm like that, where I have crawled across the finish line. But in this case, I did the half marathon. My last 2 miles were the fastest miles I ran of the entire race, and I was able to finish pretty strong. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about how you should adjust your pacing and your effort, both in training and in races, because I think there's some misunderstandings about an effective way to do that. Now, a couple things to say first is that everybody is individual. Humidity, heat, wind, they all affect us a little bit differently, so you have to know yourself. And acclimation matters a little bit as well. So everything I'm going to talk about is just kind of a general starting point, but you need to adjust for yourself. But let's first talk about acclimation. So acclimation is how used to you are running in those conditions. It's whatever weather you've been running in the last 10 to 14 days is going to determine how well acclimated you are. Now, acclimated does not mean there's no impact. It does mean there's a little bit less impact because you're acclimated. So what happened in this particular race is you get people saying, well, I trained in this all summer. First of all, we had a relatively cool summer. That really wasn't the case. You didn't really train in that this summer. Secondly, the last 10 to 14 days in general had been very cool. There was one day I wore gloves that morning, so we were not acclimated to this weather at all, meaning it was likely going to have a pretty full impact on people. Now next, there are all kinds of different ways that you can judge. There's dew point, humidity, temperature. There are apps you can get. There are websites. There's lots of ways to do it. Here's a way that I do it that's fairly simple. You look at humidity, and for every 5 percentage points over 60% that the humidity will be, you're going to add 2 seconds to your time. So if the humidity was going to be 70%, that's 2 5% increments above 60. That would be a 4-second difference. For humidity, every 5 percentage points over 60, add 2 seconds to your time. For the temperature, you're going to add 1 second for every degree over 70. Meaning if the weather is, say, 65 degrees and it's not going to be warmer than 65 degrees, you don't adjust for the temperature at all, but you'll adjust probably for the humidity. All right. Another thing to consider with the temperature, though, is it going to be cloudy or sunny? And that matters a lot. If you have direct sun, you have to assume that it's warmer than what the temperature is. You have that radiant heat of the sun beating down on you. That happened in this race. There was cloudy for quite a while, but then once the sun came up, people were like, oh my gosh, because that temperature goes up, the sun is beating on you, you've got to consider that. So let's use an example. Let's say that I was running a marathon. I'm shooting for 4 hours, which is right around a 9:09 pace is what I'm doing. The way I would pace that is for the first 1, 2, 3, or 5 miles, I'm going to be a little bit slower than that. I'm going to run right around a 9:20 pace rather than my 9:09. Then from miles 3 through 5, somewhere in there, through about 23 or so, I'm going to settle into my goal pace right around 9:10, 9:09, whatever that is. And then towards the finish, it's, whatever I have left, hopefully being able to go a little bit faster to make up for starting a little bit slower in here and finish strong and get my 9:09 pace. That's generally how I would pace a marathon. You have to consider hills and things like that, but on a flat course marathon, that's generally how I would pace that. So let's take a look at whether it was actually fairly close to what the weather was for Fox Valley, but a little bit hypothetical. Let's say it's 7 o'clock. It's going to be 68 degrees, 95% humidity, and cloudy, all the way down to the bottom. By the time you get to 10 o'clock, it's going to be up to 80 degrees. Maybe the humidity is down to 80% by then, but it's going to be sunny. Fairly close to what was happening in the race this weekend. So how, get my fingers licked, would you adjust for that? So the humidity, you look and say, where's the highest humidity of the day? That's that first hour in the morning. So at 95%, that's going to be 7 of those 5% increments over 60 times 2 seconds. That's a 14-second adjustment for the humidity. I think the humidity was actually a touch lower than that for Fox Valley. It was 90%, so it would have been 12 seconds, but in my example. Now let's look at the temperature. Look at the highest temperature you'll be running in. That's going to be that last hour, where it's going to be 80 degrees, plus I'd toss another 5 degrees on that because it's sunny. You don't always know that based upon the forecast. Actually, the forecast said it was going to be cloudy, so the sun was a surprise. But that's 15 degrees over 80. That is 1 second for every degree. That is 15 seconds. Now, what happens is that most people will adjust for the humidity in the morning And then they figure they adjust for the temperature later on. The fact is you need to add them together. You need to look at a total adjustment of probably 25 to 30 seconds when you're running this race, because all those adjustments are kind of like when you're coming off the bench cold, if you will, and doing the run. So by the time you get to those warmer temperatures, even though the humidity has dropped down, your entire core temperature and body is heated up. So you've got to adjust for the worst humidity and the worst sun or worst temperatures you'll have the entire time. That means my 920 is more like a 950 pace, and that means that my 910 is more like a 940 pace. And here's what's going to happen. That's going to feel way too slow. So that probably the whole first half of the race, you're constantly going, this is too slow. Mark's an idiot. I didn't need to adjust this much. Believe me, if you get towards the end of the race, you got gas left, that's a wonderful thing to have to be able to kick it, but you have to feel like it's really too slow. And that happened to me in the race, probably through about mile 8. I kept thinking, maybe this is too slow. Maybe I should go faster, but I was able to kind of keep holding it back. Then finally around mile 9 or 10, I started saying, okay, maybe I'm glad I didn't do that. And then, of course, the last 2 miles, like they always do, kind of suck because you're running hard and trying to get through it. I guess the last thing to remember about whether or not that adjustment was going to be too much rather than too little, those last couple of miles of the race, you have to decide, do you want to be the passor or do you want to be the passee? I think you adjust. You always have gas at the end. You can go harder. It's a lot easier to go harder because your brain is focused and you got the energy, because once you start slowing down, it's a very difficult path. So that's my suggestions on how you might adjust your pace or effort, both in your training and your racing.